Hi guys, I'm Alyssa and I'm back with another video. Today I want to share with you my September wrap-up. It's a little bit late to the game, but I hope that you are still interested in watching it nonetheless. I ended up reading 10 books in September, so that's definitely fine. Not my best, but it's good enough. In terms of my ratings, I only had one 5 stars, but I had one 4.5 stars as well, and a handful of 4 stars. So it was an overall pretty good month, and yeah. I started out the month by reading my favorite book of the month, so let's start out with that one. That was the Undead Pool by Kim Harrison. This is book 12 in the Hola series. The Hola series is an urban fantasy series. It's really difficult talking about this series and explaining it because it's been so long since I started it, and I'm afraid of spoiling some things that this series is about. But it follows this girl, Rachel Morgan, who is a witch. She has a she had a sort of her own business with a friend who is a vampire, Ivy, and Jinx, who is this pixie, and then a lot of other side characters we are introduced to. And at this point it's difficult to talk about the book without spoiling much. I really enjoyed this. It was such a good book. I really enjoyed how it's set up for the last book. I just really enjoyed it. I am really enjoying where this one is heading, and I'm hoping that it will end up in a way that I'm hoping for. I think it has the potential to be really an epic end to the series, but we'll see what ends up happening. I'm definitely hoping that I can finish this series this year, because yeah, it's quite a long series and I've been working on it for quite a lot of years, so it'd be great to finish it. And as I said, I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars, and it's been a while since I gave a book in this series 5 stars, so definitely not all of them get that. In September I worked on a lot of books that was published the year I was born. I thought it was a fun thing to do considering my birthday was in September, and so I have a video vlog about that. I'll try and remember to link it up above so that you can check it out if you haven't watched it already. But the first book that I finished for that is Hatchet by Kerr Paulson, and this is the first book in a series about this boy who crashes in the Canadian wilderness. He is only, I think, 10 or 11, I've forgotten how old he is, and then suddenly has to survive on his own. His parents are divorced, and so he's on his way to visit his father, I believe, when he crashes on the plane. It's a private plane, so it's only like him and the pilot has a heart attack, or like, yeah, and dies while flying, and so yeah, goes on from there. I had really high hopes for this because it's so praised among a lot, and I do think it was interesting and very realistic in how things were handled, I guess, in some places. But I sort of wanted more. I wanted a little bit, for me it was very dull, so I definitely didn't get what I wanted to from it. I think I gave it 3 stars, but I don't know if it's more of a 2.5 stars, but 3 stars because it was actually pretty well written, and so I guess that's why I ended up giving it 3 stars. Then I read Dagger Spell by Katharine Kerr. Again, this is a book I read for the same video. This is a classic fantasy book, obviously, and it follows this. It's a fantasy that was written by a woman. Not a lot of fantasy back then was. It follows a girl who has this special magical power. She's part of this clan, and there's something, I've forgotten what it's about because I didn't really get connected to any of it, so I have a hard time remembering what this book is about, but there's something to do with I feel like there's something to do with time. I gave it 2.5 stars. 2 stars? 2.5 stars. So it wasn't definitely a very good book. It was my least favorite book of the month, for sure. There was also romance, I remember that, and I wasn't really into that, so I don't know. It wasn't super great for me. Then I read Blood of Amber by Roger Zelazny. This is a companion book of all the 10 Amber Chronicle novels. So I've now read the first 7 books in that series, and I have 3 more books left. I don't know when I'll finish it, but like the first 5 books follows Corwin, who is a very interesting character, and I far prefer them to the books that we've been introduced from the Merlin quintet, I guess you call it. It was interesting, and there definitely has some traits that are similar to our main character in the first one, but I just want more from it, I guess. Amber is a place where, like, you could sort of, is a fantastical place, but you can sort of some people can travel between Amber and Earth and other places. So yeah, there's a lot of talk about how that is done, and not a lot of people can do it, but our main characters obviously can. It wasn't very exciting. I ended up giving it 3 stars, but because it was okay, but it was just, compared to the other books, I was a little bit disappointed. The next one I finished is a Danish fantasy, and that is Forglem by Kappel Jensen. Translated into English, it would be Forget Me Nots. This is the second book in a trilogy. The trilogy is called Rosenholm Trilogien, and it's set on this posh boarding school in somewhere on Zealand, where people who has these magical abilities are going, and the magical elements are more like elemental magic kind of stuff. So it's someone who can sense what other people are feeling. Someone has like this death magic, so they can see ghosts, talks to spirits and stuff, and sort of that. It has a really creepy undertone, and this one is more of a mystery, where these 4 girls who we were introduced to in the first book are exploring, trying to figure out who murdered this ghost person that they can see, and get a lot of revelations towards that, and had quite an epic ending. So I've really been enjoying these books so far, both the books in the trilogy so far, and I gave them both 4 out of 5 stars. I'm really looking forward to reading the last and final book in the trilogy, as it's set up quite well for that. I was definitely a little bit of a cliffhanger at the end, and you wanted to definitely know what was going to happen by the end of this. The next one that I finished was another Danish fantasy book, and that was called A Blod og Støv, or translated into English that would be Of Blood and Dust, and this is by Julie M. Day. This is the first time I read something by this author. I have a trilogy of hers that I'm really looking forward to reading now. This is a sort of high fantasy type book. It's very set up to be a epic fantasy kind of thing. We're following multiple perspectives. We are following the perspective of this young witch girl called Yara. She's the youngest of these coven of 3 witches. Then we are following the crown prince of this place, and when he is married off to this dwarf, which was something he definitely didn't expect, and seems that is kind of a mockery to him. And then we are following the perspective of another girl who is part of this this clan, where she is basically like the head of the family kind of thing, and ready to take over the clan when they are attacked, and a lot of them are taken as slaves, and some people are brutally murdered, and things happen from there. And so we're following these different perspectives, and I definitely enjoyed my time reading it. It was very interesting. It definitely set up the world for the coming books very, very well. I'm very interested in the Crown Princess, what he's doing, and there was also another perspective that, like a couple of other perspectives we were introduced to, that I'm definitely looking forward to exploring more from, but those 3 people were the ones that we saw the most from. So yeah, this was definitely interesting. I gave it also a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed my time reading it, and I'm happy I'm starting to really get into some Danish fantasy, because I've not been as good as picking that up, but I've definitely become more and more eager to pick more of it up in in the future, and I have a good handful of books that I can pick up that I already own, so I'll try my best to get more of that read in the future. Sadly, none of the books that I've been talking about that is Danish fantasy that hasn't been translated, and I don't know if it's ever going to be, so that is the downside of reading these books, because I can't really recommend them to... I can recommend them, but you can't really do anything about it if you're not able to understand the Danish language, so that's definitely not super fair. The next book is the final book that I read for the reading books that were published in my birth year kind of thing. This, I haven't removed the bookmark from the last bit, but It by Stephen King, Det Onde in Danish. This is the book that I've owned the longest ever, like without reading it. I bought this before Goodreads, I bought this before I was even actually reading, probably. I think I read the first 50 pages when I just, or 30 pages something when I just picked it up, and couldn't get more into it at the time because I wasn't reading. However, I'm super happy I did pick it up. This book is definitely the one where I've been the most scared while reading a Stephen King book. Not that the entirety of this book is scary, because it's not like 1,000 pages worth of scariness and you feeling like totally creeped out, but especially like the first 2/3 of the book, there was a lot of extremely creepy things happening that I was really enjoying, and I liked seeing the chapters that went back in time to talk about the history of Derry, the city that this is set in. If you don't know anything about this is set in Derry in Maine. I always thought it was a small town, but actually Derry is the same size as the town that I'm living in currently. So to me, it's not really a small town. It's just a relatively normal sized city for Danish standards. And so that was interesting, but it's set in Derry and it follows these kids going to the same school, who experiences these very, very strange and very creepy things happening to them. They can't really explain them, and they're very different, the things that they're experiencing, and then it follows their perspective from when they're young, and it follows them when they're older and get back, but they've forgotten what happened, but they just know that there was something about this when that they had to go back to Derry and figure out what was going on and trying to put a stop to this, because that was like a deal they made with each other, but they just don't remember what happened. And I thought that concept was really, really interesting. The way that Stephen King writes, discusses fear and writes how you frightening stuff, like the experience of fear, how different it's, how people react to fear and scary stuff, is really, really interesting. What I didn't like about this is the ending, and there's a unnecessarily amount of talk about sex when they were like, what were they, like 12, 13, when they were kids, when we're following from that perspective, and they were talking huge amount of sex in a lot of this, and the way there's a lot of problematic elements to the ending that I think if you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. There will be people saying that, I mean, it was a different time and all of that, and I can excuse a lot of things, but that specific thing I don't think is something that I would ever consider an okay thing. But I did enjoy it, and there were a couple of places in this where I wasn't as excited to pick it up, but overall I give it 4 stars. I'm super happy I read it, and I definitely recommend it, and I understand why a lot of people enjoys this Stephen King book so much, and it recommends it so much, because it is definitely a very well told and written story, with the exception of like the ending. So yeah, happy I read it, and worth the wait, I guess, 4 stars. Then I read These Women by Pochoda. This is a book that is following the different perspectives. A detective is one of them. It is about something happening to these girls that is very, very similar. And then they find out that something is happening, and they're trying to help, like, figure out what's going on. And yeah, it's kind of a thriller, but also like a lot of talk about social society, like different things. I did enjoy my time reading it. It was a well narrated story, the audio, but I wasn't completely in love with this book. I ended up giving it 3 stars, 3.5 stars actually, so a little more than 3 stars. It was dark, and it had some very good discussions about racial injustices as well. Whether that was completely accurate, I don't know. It's not an own voices thing, but it does talk about perspectives from both a black girl, a white girl, and from different classes. One of them is a detective, one of them is a prostitute, I think. So there's like a lot of different type of characters in this, and I guess overall there was a lot of things that worked for me, but then there was a lot of other things that didn't work as much, but I give it 3.5 stars. Then I read When No One Is Watching by Alyssa. This is her most recent book. The only other book that I've read by this author was The Extraordinary Union, which is the first book in the Loyal League, a Civil War set romance. I really enjoyed it, but this one is quite different. It's more of a thriller with a few romantic elements into it. It follows this 2 perspectives from a man and a woman. They live on the same street across from each other, and this woman has always been living in Brooklyn and always found it a safe place for her to stay. She's a black woman, and the man we're following the perspective from is a white man. And this white man, he is married, definitely in a relationship with this woman, and has sort of started falling out of love with that woman because of some things that she's been doing, and especially because of some things that she's been saying. And in the beginning of this book, she's throwing him out with nothing, like he has no money, he's lost his job and all of that. And then we have the perspective of this older woman who starts experiencing a lot of people just disappearing off the streets, who has always been some good people, and strange things happening, especially to the black community. It was really interesting and very on point about some things that are happening right now with the corrupt system and stuff. So there was really a lot of discussions on that, and it was very creepy in times. It wasn't as scary as I thought it would be, but the last third of it was really creepy. But I did enjoy my time reading this. I think Alyssa Cole is an exceptional good author. I really can't wait to read more from her. In the future, I'm definitely going back to finish the Loyal League, as well as I want to read the Reluctant Royals books as well, because I think she has such an interesting type of storytelling, and that works well for both like contemporary romances, historical romance, and apparently also this. I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it, and I think it could have gotten a 5 stars if like the overall pacing of the story had been a little bit better for me. But I did really enjoy it, and yeah, I highly recommend it. The last and final book that I finished in September was You Had Me at Hola by Alexis something. I haven't written down the surname for some reason for this. I'm sorry. This is a book, a romance that follows this Latino woman and man, both of their perspectives, And it's set at this movie set, following them as they are doing this TV show about this. Like, you can expect, like, probably see it as like a Netflix show that explores families and things that happen in this Latino, like, this culture. And I think if I had known the setting of this book, I would have known that this was probably not going to be something for me, because I don't really care about movie sets and what happens on a movie set and all of that acting, fame. I don't necessarily hate reading about people being famous, but I don't really care about the story surrounding this movie set. And I realized that almost the minute I started this, and that I wasn't going to be enjoying it. Also, I think personally that if there was a little too many sex scenes, that's a personal preference. But I think it took over a little too much for my own personal taste. But otherwise I enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting seeing this from this cultural perspective. They were Cuban, I believe. I really enjoyed both perspectives, and they had some things happening in their personal lives that made them act a certain way, and they had some secrets for the other, and all of that. I also kind of don't like that trope, but sort of understood it coming from the male perspective, why he was keeping a certain thing a secret, because of things that had happened previously. But overall, this was a 3-star for me, and I know that this is a personal preference, so if you don't mind this setting, I think you'll really enjoy it. But for me, that was what initially made me lose interest in the story as a whole. I didn't look forward to picking it up. It was a bit of a slog to get through it because of the setting, and that was a little bit sad. So yeah, but this was the last and final book that I read in September. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of the books that I've been talking about, what your thoughts were on them, if you did, if you agree with any of my thoughts. Also, let me know if you read any exciting books this month, then definitely let me know about that. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next video very soon. Goodbye!